Hello, my name is Robert Dean Steele, and this is your daily Bible class. I'm in the AM 930 The Light studio just to kind of change things up. Listen to what it says in Matthew chapter 5, verses 27. You have heard it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that if anyone looks at a woman lustfully, he has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right hand causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. If it is better for you to lose one part of your body, than your whole body be thrown in hell. If your right hand causes you to stumble, then cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than to go have your whole body to go into hell. Now that doesn't mean that Jesus wants you to start gouging out your eyes and cutting off your hands. That's not what he's talking about here. What he's talking about is, of course, the whole act of the heart. He says adultery and lust all start with just allowing allow that thing that comes to the eye gate. Because you have to realize that temptation comes through the five senses. So it could come through your hearing, it could come through your taste, it could come through your eyes, it could be through your touch, it could be from your hearing. It could be someplace within our five senses. But in this case, he says, when you look at a woman, and he's talking about men here, but it could be women as well. He says, when you look at someone with lust in your heart, you've already committed adultery with them. What Jesus was talking about was the fact that adultery always starts with just a look. It always then goes into a thought. Every part of sin starts with a progression. The progression of sin is this. You start off with a thought. And then as you entertain the thought, it becomes a strong thought. And as it becomes a strong thought, you begin to do your imagination. It becomes an imagination. You start thinking about what would life actually be with this person. And then you become dissatisfied with your life partner. And you begin to look at them in the wrong manner. And of course, then it goes on to a stronghold, because then not only are you entertaining the thought, not only are you beginning to think about what would it be like for being with that person, but then you could actually commit the act of adultery. And it all begins with a simple thought. So what Jesus is saying is right away, cut that thought off. Just immediately say, no, I'm not going to go there. You see, temptation, you can be tempted and yet sin not. For example, let's say you have a propensity towards chocolate cake, and the doctor has told you to stay away from chocolate cake. You know chocolate cake is not good for you, and so someone puts a piece of chocolate cake in front of you, and you're tempted to take that chocolate cake. You're entertaining the thought, but then you cut it off and say, no, I know that chocolate cake is not good for me. It's the same way with the alcoholic. He knows that booze is bad for him. He knows that booze will make him do something, but someone puts a bottle of booze in front of him, and he's tempted. He says, I know I can't take this because it will do a destructive thing in my life. It's the same way with adultery or with any form of sin. Jesus says you've got to cut it off, because if you give into it, it will destroy your life. It will lead you into all kinds of things. Now, Jesus says adultery is a very bad thing. It's very bad, because it destroys relationships, it destroys family, and it's all caused because of lust in our hearts. We're not satisfied with where we are in our relationship. And let me just tell you this. There are times with our spouses that it doesn't go well. There are times where we don't feel that we're in love with them. There are times where, it almost seems that there's a wall between us. But what is it that keeps us going? Remember, first of all, the reasons why you fell in love with them. Go back to those days where you think to your imagination, this person was an absolutely wonderful person. Remember the qualities that they exhibited and the reason why you fell in love with them. And secondly, remember your commitment. When you stood before the preacher and you stood before that company of witnesses and you said that you'd love, honor, and cherish them. You said that you'd make this commitment for life. There are times where you just have to stand there and say, I've made a commitment to this individual, and I am not going to let anything dissuade me or keep me from that commitment. But Jesus was talking about adultery. He says, have you not said, you shall not commit adultery? He says, but I tell you that if anyone looks at a man or a woman lustfully, they have already committed adultery in their heart. We can do that, folks, and we need to be careful of that, and we need to dispel those things. We need to cut them off, and we need to say, no, I'm not going to give in to them because I recognize the consequences. Number one, it breaks a relationship with me and God. Number two, it breaks a relationship with the person that I've committed my life to. Folks, that's why adultery is so dangerous. And, of course, as well, when you commit adultery with someone else, what you're doing is you're breaking a relationship with your spouse and with your loved one. And think about the consequences. Don't be so selfish and think about yourself. You're saying to yourself, well, I deserve this. You don't deserve this. What you're doing is you're breaking a covenant with God, you're breaking a covenant with your spouse, and you're destroying lives. Think about your spouse. Think about your children. Think about them first. And you know what? Think about what God says about it. And in that way, you'll prevent this thing from happening. Cut it off before it even has a chance to get into your life. Don't entertain it. My name is Robert Dean Steele. This is your daily Bible class. You have yourself a great and godly day.